Hello and welcome to the MMA Live Chat Show. I'm Davie and it's Friday, September 12th, 2014. On today's show, we'll be discussing the TUF 20 Episode 1 show and the news about Nick Diaz being arrested on suspicion of DUI, along with a few other charges. And maybe we'll do a final thoughts segment if time allows. On today's show, right now it's just me, but we should have Fred Kirby joining me during the show at some point here. But I want to go ahead and get started here. So let me go ahead and start with the first topic that we're going to cover here. The TUF 20 Episode 1 recap show premiered on September 10th, 2014, and was an interesting show, as many of us thought it might be. I did hear a few complaints, though, about the background stories that took up over an hour on the show, but I found the stories of the ladies to be interesting, and it was necessary in order to familiarize MMA fans who don't really follow or haven't been following women's MMA. But other than those few complaints about that, that was really all I heard on the negative side of things. There were a few different twists as to how things were handled on this show, and the biggest change this season was the seeding of the fighters. The first season, or actually the first fight of the season, was pretty damn good, and that was between the underdog Randa Markos, who was ranked number 14, versus Tecia Torres, who was one of the favorites to win the show, and she was ranked number 3 going into that fight. It was a very close fight, and during round 1 it looked like Tecia Torres was going to win the fight rather easily, but Randa Markos came on strong in the second round, winning round 2 without a doubt. I mean, there was no question round 2 who won that round. Round 3 was very damn close as well. And I think it was, more of Tecia Torres actually losing the round than Randa Markos actually winning the round convincingly. I actually scored the fight during the show, and I had Randa Markos winning decision 29-28. It seemed to me that once Markos landed some of that ground and pound on Torres, Torres was very reluctant to mix it up, and I believe that's actually what did her in. It's my feeling that if Torres would have been as aggressive in the third round as she was earlier on in the fight, she probably would have won the fight, because that third round, like I said, was so very close. Another thing that I really don't get about the seeding is, you rank the fighters 1 through 16, and, I guess they had to do that, but I just don't understand how they pit the fighters against each other when they do the seeding like that. Taking the number 1 fighter and put them up against the number 16 fighter. I find that a little odd. If they were thinking there was such a discrepancy between those two fighters, why would they put the best fighter against what they were perceiving to be the weakest fighter? So, I find that a little odd there, but other than that, I guess, what they could have done was, they could have just actually, let the fighting go on the way that they did, and, pick the picks the way that they did, and, just not mention, the seeding and things like that. The ranking I can understand, rank the fighters the way that you did, but, I still have a problem with, ranking number 1 against number 16, 2 against 15, and so on and so forth. But, that is how they did it. So it was a great fight. I thought some of the stories were interesting on the ladies. I didn't realize that some of the ladies had so many problems, but maybe that, in fact, is what causes some people to actually become fighters. They struggle so much in their personal lives, and then they need some sort of an outlet to, vent those, frustrations and worries and things like that go on in their lives. So maybe that's, in fact, what causes, a lot of fighters to actually become fighters, the personal struggles in their life, and then they're looking for, a way to vent those, problems that they do have. Not quite sure what happened to Fred here, but it doesn't look like he's going to be joining me right now. We're actually supposed to have, 3 or 4 guys on the show, but sometimes life gets in the way, and the guys had other things to do. I know Damon was going to be here. He actually was going to do some sort of a bass fishing tournament. He's a big fisherman. That's his major hobby, and I'm probably sure you've heard him on the show talk about how he needs to wrap things up because he wants to go fishing. So that's the story with Damon, and then of course Brandon, who was new to the show last time out, he was going to join us as well, but he had some issues there where he had to take care of his kid. And I see we've got my buddy Fred here. Fred, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you, Rich.
Okay, I don't know if you heard anything that I said there. I just ran through the whole breakdown of what I thought about the fight and the show there. Um, First, give me your opinion, then we'll go into some discussion. What did you think of the season one episode? I
I
mean,
personally, I loved it. I loved the way they introduced the stories and shit, the back stories on all the girls in the house. I suppose the seating thing was a little weird at first. At first, I didn't really particularly love that, but the way it ended up playing out, I felt like Tough needed a little bit of something different. So something like this was awesome, actually.
yeah, I actually had the same comments that you just made. I said the same thing. I actually enjoyed the backstories. And the only complaints I actually did hear about the show was some people complaining about the backstories and how it took up so much time in the first, episode of the season. But I enjoyed it. I mean, and as I was saying before you came on, I didn't realize that, so many of the ladies had those personal struggles that they did. And I was saying maybe that is in fact why a lot of fighters do become fighters because they need some way to vent, those frustrations or those troubles and worries that they have in their life. So I guess taking up martial arts or fighting maybe is why some fighters actually do that because of the troubles that they have in their life. I'm not saying all fighters, but maybe that was the case in this instance with some of the women on Wednesday's show. But yeah, I had that same comment that you did. I actually enjoyed those backstories. And I also had the same comment about the seating. I thought that was kind of weird. And, I'm not a sports fan. The only sports I've ever really watched in my life were combat sports from, boxing and, in the early days when wrestling was actually real wrestling. I used to watch that, and then I watched the Tough Man K1 and things like that. But as far as sports, I'm just not a big sports fan. I don't get it. But my thing with the seeding there is I don't understand. I can understand ranking the fighters, but I don't understand pitting the number one fighter against the number 16, two against 50, perceived to be the best fighter, and put them against who you perceive to be the worst fighter or the weakest fighter.
Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't make a terrible amount of sense, but and I'm not a massive sports fan either, other than combat sports as well. But I think they kind of do the same thing with college basketball, and I think the idea is to kind of shake things up a bit with upsets one and maybe two, ensure that the top seeds kind of get to where they're supposed to be. But I tell you what, man, honestly, the thing about the rankings or whatever, they're cool and it's an interesting new wrinkle to the show. But I think the very first week showed us that they don't really mean fuck all. I mean, at the end of the day, these are fucking the top 115-pound women on the planet. So I suppose any one of them could probably beat the other one on any given day. So I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into the rankings one way or the other, really.
Yeah, Carla Esparza, I follow her on Facebook, and she actually made that same comment. Rankings don't mean a whole lot when you're dealing with, the top, 16 fighters in the world going against each other. So,
Right.
I do think it's a bit of a disadvantage, though. I mean, I don't think, I mean, watching that Angela Hill, I believe is her name, who was, I believe, ranked number 16,
Hmm.
I thought she looked vicious and scary, man, with those kicks when they were highlighting her.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was going to say the same thing too, man. It is, it's really hard to tell. It's hard to say exactly who's going to do what just yet. I mean, right? I would say the only reason she probably got seated so low is because she's only 1-0. So short of training, there's only so much, actual fight experience they got to go on. But that doesn't mean you know, that she's not going to tear through the competition. It's so early, it's way too early to tell kind of how some of these girls are going to play out.
Yeah, and a couple of those girls looked a hell of a lot bigger than 115, didn't they?
Yeah, a couple of them look like they cut quite a bit of weight. And a couple of them, if I'm not mistaken, are moving up too from like the 105-pound division, the atom weight, I think it's called.
A couple of them are. Say that again.
I think that a couple of the girls, at least one of them for sure, is moving up from 105 pounds too. So
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Carla Esparza, she's friggin' tiny, man. You know?
yeah, depending on how some of these matchups end up, if one of the girls that's moving up from 105 gets seated against one of the girls that's kind of cutting from 130 or something, could be quite a size difference too in some of these fights.
Yeah, and I saw a couple of comments out there about that. Ainsley, let me pull up her name here before I screw it up real bad.
The Irish girl, or one of the Irish girls.
Yeah, I was hearing some people saying that they're thinking that she is going to be in some trouble because,
Daily.
yeah, Daly, yeah, she's. They were saying that somebody was getting reprimanded for not being on weight or something like that. Did you read anything about that?
No, I didn't hear nothing about that yet. I did see the one scene I didn't really pay attention to, but one of the preview scenes it showed one of the girls like fucking passing out in the bathroom and one of the other chicks yelling for a medic. So
Yeah,
I can't remember who was passing out or who it looked like.
yeah, that was Aisling Daly. I was the one that I'm referencing. She wound up being picked last for the teams, but she was ranked number 5.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, this season is going to be extremely fun and extremely telling for a brand new weight division. It's really compelling as fuck, man.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
this.
I did see a little bit of people kind of bitching and moaning about the backstories a little bit. And I can kind of see where they're going with that. But on the same token, man, this is a brand new weight division. Most of us, or at least most of the outsiders have no idea who any of these girls are. There's a very rich history there with most of them having fought each other on local circuits or in Invicta. So, they all had really fucking great stories. You know what I mean? Like I thought that really set the show up good. And that's what the Ultimate Fighter does really well. The Ultimate Fighter's gotten a bit stale, but it does a great job of telling stories and getting you to really give a fuck about these fighters and to want to root for somebody. I mean, that shit really plays into the big picture of all this,
I
man.
really like that stuff. I like the stories about the fighters. I know a lot of fans, and to me, it's the tough guy fans, the keyboard warrior type fans, where, they say, well, I don't give a fuck about the fighter. I just want to see them fight, and, I actually like to know who the fighter is. I'm kind of weird that way, I guess, but, it gives me something to root for because if I don't like somebody because I think they're a dick, I'm probably not going to root for them simply for that fact there. But like I said in the opening there, it was necessary to give those backstories, especially on these women, to familiarize MMA fans who don't really follow women's MMA or haven't been following women's MMA, so they have a little idea of who these women are.
Exactly, exactly. It's like, who is Tecia Torres and why should you give a fuck? Well, here is who is Tecia Torres and here's why you should care. It tells you who these people are and why you should either root for them or root against them, maybe. Even with the whole Felice Herrig thing, she's got the whole bad girl thing going down. The whole fucking house kind of hates her and she does, but it's kind of a good thing, man. It's going to make everything very interesting.
Did you like those shorts she was wearing on the show?
Yeah, pretty provocative. She fucking jumps on the dummy and she's riding it. But I think she knows it pisses those other girls off, man. So,
Yeah, she makes comments about that all the time. I follow her on Facebook too, and she's always talking about how the other women don't like her playing up the feminine side of herself, and you know she's always taking pictures of herself, in bed in the morning with her her bed hair and things like that, and I kind of like it. I mean, I wasn't really a big fan of hers until I actually started following her, and I saw she's really a genuine and nice person, so I don't understand what everybody has against her. The fact that she takes pictures of herself and she does a lot of selfies. I mean, come on, gets a lot of guys following her. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, well, I think that it's probably a little bit of that, probably a little bit of females just fucking hating, quite frankly. But there's probably also, being female fighters, I'm sure they feel like they need to represent themselves in a certain way so that fucking people take them seriously. And, taking selfies of you in skin tight panties probably isn't going to get guys that necessarily, in general, take you seriously as a fighter or what have you. But,
Yeah, she's got a
um,
lot of purrs that follow her, man. I can't believe some of the shit she puts up with.
yeah, well, she probably that's probably part of the goal is she wants the followers. She wants she's but I like it, man. I like that she stands out, that she's causing a rift. She's gonna be, I guarantee you that she is a part of a few of the more popular episodes this season.
Yeah, and I don't know if you watched the transformation of her physique. Um, on the side, I put up a couple of threads about her. Since I started following her, I became a big fan of hers, and the transformation of her body. I mean, she went from looking like, pretty much your typical girly girl fighter to, a fighter that's extremely well toned and looking like a badass. I mean,
Yeah.
she looks like she could put a hurting on a few of those girls.
Yeah, yeah, she looks tough, man. That's why this whole season's so interesting. All of these girls look really fucking good, and the first fight was really good, and it came with a pretty dramatic upset. So, I mean,
Yeah, I want to
I
ask you. I want to ask you about that in just a minute here, but I do want to tell people that I did do a show the day on Wednesday of the Tough uh, episode one show there. Just to remind everybody that there was a show coming up for Tough, and I did a breakdown of the women and everything like that. So I'm not going to run through that again here, but I just want to let people know what the rankings were as far as how DFW, and I don't know who did the rankings. I don't think it was actually the coaches. It was DFW and somebody else.
I would
But
suppose probably the person who controls those weight divisions in the UFC, Sean Shelby, maybe
Sean Shelby or the other fellow.
Joe Silva.
Yeah. All right, so rank number one was Carla Esparza. Number two, Joanne Calderwood. Number three was Tecia Torres. Number four, we have, oh, Jessica Penne. Number five, Aisling Daly. Number six, Felice Herrig. Wow, I'm surprised she was ranked so high. Number seven, Rose Namajunas. Wow, that's kind of shocking. But I guess because Felice has more experience. Number eight, Beck Rawlings. Number nine, Justine Kish. Number 10, Alex Chambers. Number 11, Heather Clark. Number 12, Angela Magana. Number 13, Lisa Ellis. Number 14, Randa Markos. And number 15, again, was Angela. Number 15 was 15. Oh, Emily Kagan. And number 16, Angela Hill. So I'm kind of surprised the way that some of the rankings went there. I mean, the top, five, I'm not all that surprised about, but seeing Felice Herrig at number six, I was a little surprised about that, looking at some of the other talent that was ranked below her. But yeah, that was a great fight, wasn't it, man? And what did you think of that, and how did you score it?
It was a really good fight, but I had what was her name? Randa Markos. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I had her winning. I had her winning. I think that Tecia Torres won the first round
clearly.
relatively convincingly, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly. But I think that in the second round, when she was on top of Tecia Torres, landing that ground and pound, I think that's the closest that the fight came to actually getting stopped.
yeah.
Um, I think she was really fucking her up with that grounding pound at the end
And
of
that
that.
just took the life out of her, didn't it? I mean, because after she
Yeah,
beat her, that was a beatdown in round two.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like that was the closest the fight ever came to really actually being stopped. I mean, she was, if that fight would have went on another 2 or 3 minutes, say with her on top of her, she probably would have actually finished her. And I
Yeah.
think that probably definitely sucked the life out of her a bit going into the third round. And the third round was definitely a little bit closer than the first two, but I think she still edged her out and won the fight.
Yeah, I actually thought round two could have gone either way. I actually scored, 29-28 the same way you did for Randa Markos there. But, I wouldn't have complained if it would have gone the other way because round three was actually pretty close. But Um, again, I had Randa, like you did, edging out the win in that one there. But I think, like you're saying there, in round two, I mean, that beatdown was so severe in round two that took the life out of Tecia Torres, and she was extremely tentative. I mean, actually, both of the girls coming into the third round, they were both a little tentative, and they both weren't really going for it going into the third round in the first couple of minutes there. And I think, Torres actually, that was her downfall, as far as not winning the fight there because, like I said in the opening of the show here, it seemed to me that once Markos landed some of that nasty ground and pound on Torres, I mean, Torres was just very reluctant to actually get in there and mix it up. And, she just, if she would have been as aggressive in the third as she was earlier on in the fight, she probably would have won the fight. But you could see that round two just kind of mind fucked her.
Yeah, yeah, she definitely was landing some nasty, nasty ground and pound on her. I was actually kind of surprised at how powerful that ground and pound was in the second round.
I was too, because after the first round, I thought for sure there was no way she was going to win.
Yeah, I know. And she came out and put on a clinic with that ground and pound in the second.
Yeah. Right. Any more comments on that show there before we go on to the Nick Diaz news?
Nah, good episode, good first episode.
Yeah. And next week, it's going to be Joanne Calderwood.
Hold on. Give me 1 second.
Okay. And I guess I will let everybody else know here. They do have the fight picked out for next week, and next week, as I started to mention there, it's going to be Joanne Calderwood versus Emily Kagan. Joanne Calderwood, as Fred mentioned earlier, is 8-0, and Emily Kagan is 3-1. So again, I have a hard time with the way that they, do the seeding and matching up of the fighters like that. Why would you take somebody who has twice as many fights and put them against somebody who has, 4 fights to their 8? And again, Joanne Calderwood was ranked number 2 by DFW and the UFC brass, and Emily Kagan was ranked number 15. They don't know if Fred is back with me yet.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back with you.
Okay, yeah, I was just saying that the fight next week, Joanne Calderwood and Emily Kagan, and again, like you mentioned earlier, I don't understand why you take a fighter who is 8-0, ranked number 2, and put them against a fighter who is 3-1, twice as many fights and, a perfect record. So kind of odd the way that they do that.
Yeah, probably just like I said, to try to ensure that top seed kind of gets through to the next round. And it mixes things up a bit because it, adds the
my closing comment on that is I actually would like to see, I would have liked to have seen fighters that were closer ranked to each other fight each other, To me, that makes sense.
I guess the idea with that is, too, though, that you get those matches in the semifinals, so you end up getting those as opposed to, having these kind of matches fuck around and make it to the finals or the semifinals.
Yeah. Right, I know you said you might have to leave early. You're still on the same time constraint?
Yeah, I still am, actually. I have to leave in 5 minutes.
All right, we'll breeze through this real quick here then. Let's talk about the Nick Diaz news. According to Sergeant Stephen Maynard, on September 6th, Nick Diaz was arrested on suspicion of DUI near his home in Stockton, California, after being pulled over by police. He was found to be under the influence of alcohol and taken to a local jail where additional charges of obstruction and attempting to destroy evidence were filed against him, in addition to driving with a suspended license. The obstruction and destroying evidence charges stem from Diaz submitting to a breathalyzer test, but he apparently tried to vomit out the alcohol out of his system after asking police officers to use the restroom, and officers actually accompanied him into the restroom. And once they realized what he was doing, they tried to stop him over and over, and apparently they were successful after a while there. But, Nick Diaz was allowed to go free in his own recognizance after he sobered up, and he is expected to be arraigned within the next couple of weeks. Today, Friday, September 12th, the UFC released a statement to MMA Junkie that states, "We are aware of the situation and are in the process of gathering the facts. We understood that there is a legal process Well, we understand that there is a legal process that will now take place and that Nick Diaz will have the opportunity to address the situation in the near future. And Nick Diaz hasn't released a statement just yet, but knowing Nick Diaz, he will likely be addressing things with a couple of flying one-finger salutes, knowing him. Comments on that?
I don't really know what to make of that, man. Yeah, it's interesting. He got caught trying to puke it out. I don't know. I don't think that much will come of it, honestly. It'll be a headline for a couple of days. I don't think he'll end up doing any time over it, and maybe the UFC might fine him a little bit, maybe, but more than likely, not a whole lot will come of it. I think he'll still make the fight with Anderson January 31st. All will be well.
Well, he's one of the name fighters that the UFC seems to favor, and just as John Jones was busted for DUI, wrecking his car, his what was that, his Rolls Royce, whatever the hell that was, no, his Bentley.
Yeah.
Bentley into a pole under a DUI, and he didn't get in trouble at all for that. So, being that it's Nick Diaz, more than likely nothing will happen to him, knowing how the UFC favors certain fighters over others.
Yeah, well, like I said, if anything does happen to him, it might be a little fine or something, but they're sure as shit not going to suspend him. I wouldn't imagine. So.
Well, in California, what I was reading there is that the DUI is only a misdemeanor charge, unless you've got a previous DUI or you've injured somebody. So as long as Nick Diaz hasn't injured anybody or has a previous DUI, then it'll just be a misdemeanor, which is why they apparently let him go under his own recognizance, because if he would have had either of those circumstances, he wouldn't be out, because it would probably be, a felony charge against him.
Yeah, I haven't never heard of anything of him having one before, and I didn't hear anything like anybody was hurt in this incident. So
yeah, I was actually questioning, because all the articles I was reading about it, they were just saying DUI, driving under the influence, and that, that's pretty generic in today's terms, because some states actually have tests where they swab your mouth and they see if you've been smoking weed or anything like that. So I actually was thinking in my head, Nick Diaz, weed.
Right, yeah. But in the latest article I just read, they said that I think it was, alcohol.
Yeah, it was. I confirmed that there, because it was actually, I read that article on MMA Junkie where they actually spoke to a police officer at the precinct where he was arrested.
Right.
Okay. Kind of odd. Lots of odd things going on in the MMA world, huh?
Yeah, it's been fun, man. It's been fun. The Ultimate Fighter is really great, though. I'm stoked for this whole season, so I can't wait.
I think they're like you were saying. Yeah, I think with the rankings and everything, I'm glad that they did do the rankings so you could have some sort of idea where the women are in that division. But that kind of excludes some of the women that are already signed to the UFC in the strawweight division. So. It's not just those 16 ladies that are in the UFC strawweight division. There's, I believe, 3 or 4 more that they've already signed and have fought in the UFC already, I believe.
Right. Well, and there's probably right now a real ranking, because you got to think most of these fights happened a few months ago. So
yeah.
The UFC brass have seen these fights, and there's probably a completely new ranking system now with the winner or the 2 girls that are going to fight for the title, whatever. So.
All right, buddy. Any more comments on either of those 2 topics?
No, sir. That does it for me.
Okay. Any more comments on anything else?
No, sir. Not today.
Okay, buddy. Yeah, I'm a little pressed for time today, too, and I just want to run in here and get this done real quick here. Sorry I started without you, but I was pressed for time myself as well.
No problem, brother. I'm glad we got it in.
All right, man. Thanks again for showing up, Freddie. Appreciate it, buddy, and I'll see you next time.
Sweet.
Have a good one.
Man.